Welcome, everyone, to the R.E.S.T podcast, where our goal is to help each and every one of you displace confusion, chaos, and dis-ease in order to heal and find significance in life. I am your host, Natalie Williams, and I am here with the author of the Reconstitution Method for Healing and Rest, Virginia Dixon.
Hi, Natalie.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So today we are kind of wrapping up July a little bit. Of course, we have one more episode for the month, but I know that you had some really specific things that you wanted to cover today.
I do. And I am looking forward to our final wrap-up discussion, which is going to be with Catherine Vance, because she's the product of these ideas.
Yeah.
Catherine Dang was instrumental in developing her curriculum and mentoring the heart of her mom throughout Catherine's pretty much entire life.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be fun to hear from her. She has a unique perspective on so many things, but she's the voice of a generation. She's in her early 30s, and I want people to hear the consequence of understanding these fundamental principles. And there's not that many of them. They're accessible, they're understandable, and this month, obviously, we're just talking about the principles of liberty, of freedom, of the individual. Yeah. And we discussed the consequence of the ideas that emerge as we understand these principles and the language we use to communicate them.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to having her. But this month, basically, like you said, we spoke of the things that are near and dear to my heart as an immigrant. My dad made incredible sacrifices to come here, and he left an incredible heritage behind. He saw the encroachment of socialism in our country and potentially communism, and he knew that was not for him or for his family. But also as a daughter, right? And seeing what that cost him. As a sister, the impact those decisions that he made had on our lives coming to America in the 60s. It was not fun and games. And of course, I grew up, got married, and I'm a wife, a mother, and according to the state of California, a thought leader and a curriculum developer. And pretty much my life's work is centered around these ideas that expand the individual liberty of people. The gift of liberty and the cause of freedom is, I think, at the foundation of R.E.S.T. And we have very creative ways, and we certainly use technology and the conversations and the resources from the field of psychoneuroimmunology to help people understand the seed of one and the consequence of the other.
Right.
You can't secure freedom without understanding liberty, which we often talk about in the context of cause and effect, right? You can't deal with cancer if you don't understand the root of it.
Right.
And we know so much more about cancer, autoimmune diseases. You can't ultimately help somebody be free from the burden of an autoimmune disease if you don't understand the root cause of an autoimmune disease.
Right.
And again, technology facilitates all this. So in the most relevant ways, we begin where people find themselves in states of dis-ease, because that's what brings them to us.
Right.
But the conversation certainly goes deeper quickly.
Yeah. And we're usually a lot of people's last resort. At least that's what we've heard from a lot of clients, is the addressing the root and addressing the emotions behind that dis-ease is some of the hardest work that they've had to do, but also the most rewarding.
Yeah. And these are big ideas we've been talking about this month.
Right.
But ideas have consequences, which was the theme of our discussion last week, right? We chose liberty and freedom because it was 4th of July. Right. And it was an easy way to begin the conversation about cause and effect. Internal liberty is a function of the mind, the heart, the will, the conscience, and negotiating those things. And freedom is a consequence Depending on how you negotiate your liberty, your individual liberty, your conscience, it determines the measure of freedom you live with.
Right.
But that transaction is a big, big idea, but those ideas have consequences, right?
Yeah.
And when you reason through this well, the consequence of what I just said can be life-giving.
Yeah.
Right?
Positive consequence.
Well, and we see the impact it has on people's lives every single day. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my gosh, how did you figure this out? Where'd you come up with that?
Yeah.
How did you realize? And what do we always say? Laws of nature, self-evident truth, and our natural affections can really create a framework of discussion. And again, we expound on these ideas during our days of rest in our curriculum that we have online. But it's in negotiating these ideas and the power that they have that either sustains or diminishes our life. And I think that's what I want to begin to discuss today. Last week, we briefly touched on the consequence of ideas and how we negotiate those ideas and the power they have to sustain or diminish the quality of our life. Mm-hmm. These can feel like daunting thoughts or big ideas to reason through. So I thought that I would give 2 stories, something tangible to apply the things we've been discussing.
Yeah, something that people can relate to.
Something people can relate to. So I have 2 stories. One of them is a story of somebody who's very near and dear to my heart. He was one of my patients many years ago. His name is Jeff Johnson. Jeff and Laura, his wife, came in to see me. And for the sake of time, I'll discuss the first words that are forever branded in my soul. Mm-hmm. And the last encounter we had and how he met me, those first words, that last time that I would see him. And the first words were, he sat in my office and he looked at me and said, "What can you possibly do for me?" Several people told me I couldn't leave without seeing you, that this was going to be one of the most important parts of my treatment. But I have no idea what you can possibly do for me. And I remember looking at him and saying, "Jeff, I have the best job in this whole place. I get to invite you into a place of rest." Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget him saying, "What in the world is that?" And when he asked me that question, I said, "Oh, that's easy. Relational, emotional, and spiritual truth. You cannot imagine what happens when you reconcile the conflict that you have between the stories you tell yourself and the story your body's carrying pertaining to these 4 things." And I'll never forget, he turned his head and faced his wife, and tears came dripping down his cheeks. And he said, "Virginia, I've never had a day of rest in my life then." And I thought, oh, Jeff, we are going on an adventure. And so we did. Mm-hmm. And as fate would have it, fast forward, 6 months, I got a call from Montana telling me that he would be in hospice and he was wondering if I could come see him.
Yeah.
And I dropped everything, actually. And I think I took a flight within a day or 2.
Wow.
And I arrived in Bozeman, Montana at 9:30, 10:30 in the evening. And I was stunned to see Jeff waiting for me with the kids and Laura at the bottom of the escalator.
Wow.
And I gasped. I said, "What in the world are you doing here?" He was hooked up to his oxygen tanks and, the whole thing. And of course, he didn't look well. And he said, "Virginia, you kept your promise, and I wanted to pay you the honor of receiving you in my hometown." I said, "I did, huh?" I was crying, of course. And I said, "And what was that?" He said, "I'm free." And Natalie, I always say healing isn't about chasing a cure. It's about reconciling the conflicts we have within ourselves. Mm-hmm. And when we manage to do that, something beautiful happens that I frankly have no words for. But Jeff did. Mm-hmm. It got him out of a hospice bed to meet me at the airport at some ridiculous hour, right, in the night, just to say, "I'm free."
Yeah.
From the airport, they took me to this beautiful little place that was his dream home they bought near the river.
Wow.
And it looked like something that should be on Architectural Digest. It was a piece of art, and that's where I would stay. And before he left that night, he said, look out that window. You can see a bald eagle in the morning. He lands in the same place every day. And this man had accessed something so beautiful in time. It was more valuable than anything I've ever seen. And he deposited these nuggets of gold in my soul that every time I think about rest in the context of liberty and freedom and these principles that are instrumental and these ideas that really bring healing to the soul of a person, I think of him.
Yeah. He achieved freedom and peace.
And on his pilgrimage, he said, Virginia, would you explain everything you've taught me to the kids? He and Laura asked me to. And it was such an amazing thing to do that. And then, of course, when they had his service, I flew back out to Montana, and I didn't know that I would be.
Did you speak?
I was the only speaker.
Oh, no.
I thought I was coming to participate in, and she asked me to say a few words, but those were the only words.
Wow.
And I need to find them, Natalie, because they were beautiful. God gave me beautiful words to honor, and they planted this magnificent tree in memory of Jeff.
Wow.
But he's always near and dear to my heart. I don't think a single week goes by that I don't think of Jeff. Not a single week.
Yeah.
Because I hear him say, you kept your promise. I'm free. And as you know, that's the aim of rest, is to invite people into a place of rest to reconcile conflict so they can live free.
Yeah.
No experience, no money, no house, no car, no bank account, absolutely nothing can touch freedom.
Yeah.
The second person is somebody near and dear to both of our hearts, because you've had to go through this, and the whole team with me, Jane, also known as Nightbird. And our story, we were recording podcasts then, and I think she did the first 4 or 5.
Yeah, 5 through 8.
5 through 8 podcast. And she had to wrestle with profound ideas that had some significant consequences. And we just did a little segment that people can watch on YouTube. The story I'll tell.
Yeah. She recorded a cover. The original song was done by Maverick City, but she recorded the cover for R.E.S.T. And of course, Virginia, she's talked about the story before of how that came to be, but it's a great video.
It is a great video, and it was an amazing, but there you go. With Jeff, it was the principles of liberty and freedom, but with Jane, it was the consequence of ideas and the words that were defining her thought life.
Yeah.
Within a very short period of time, she was doing great, and within a short period of time, like from one week to another, she began to decline at a rate I'd never seen. I asked her, I said, what the heck happened?
Yeah.
And of course, she crumbled and fell apart and verbalized a lot of things that I don't want to discuss, but it was anger and frustration. And we had a very difficult conversation. And we touched on it in the song, but the fruit of it was great. She was able to reconcile the conflict she had within herself, and the transformation was chilling. It was amazing. It was just gripping is the word, I think. It was gripping. And I'll never forget, she came to see me right away after that. And we took those selfies of each other that you put in the video. We never liked them, but we loved those pictures.
Yes.
Because that was the day that she came in my office, and just a few weeks that transpired, and the turnaround was significant. But she did the tough work of wrestling with ideas and with words and with stories she was telling herself that were frankly not an accurate rendition of what in fact was happening. And it was a beautiful thing to watch, the transformation. So we celebrated, by the way, with those pictures we took of ourselves. And the next, I think a few days later, I was having my quiet time. And I was praying for everybody and everything, all my patients and my clients and my colleagues. And I put on worship music on the way to work. And that song came on by Maverick City. I cried all the way to the office. And I literally heard that quiet, still voice of God saying, you tell everybody you see today that this is a story of rest. This is the invitation of rest and the story they'll tell.
Yeah.
Well, guess who my very first patient was that day? It was Jane. So I said, Jane,
as fate would have it.
As fate would have it.
As God would have it.
Right? I said, Jane, close your eyes. I need you to listen to something. This is the story you're going to tell. And I played it for her. And it was like we just died and went to heaven. We weren't even in my office anymore. We both closed our eyes, and it was the shortest 7 minutes. It was amazing. And she opened up her eyes, and she had this big grin on her face. I said, and that is a story you'll tell. Mm-hmm. God has a big surprise for you. I have no idea what it is, but something great's going to happen, Jane, because the toughest thing already happened.
Yeah.
You wrestled with God. You spewed out all this anger, which he's the best person to take your anger to. And what happened? The body says, oh, thank you. I don't have to fight you and cancer now.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful thing. So she said, I'm recording this song for rest. As you well know, Natalie, within a few weeks, that song was recorded. Ryland showed up like he always does, and he did a magnificent job. I had to be at a political event that day, and Riley, which is so sweet, did backup.
Yes,
for
backup
Jane.
singing.
And little did we know that that would be the only opportunity we would have to record that.
Yeah.
But it was beautiful, and I'll never, ever, 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 ever forget Jeff or Jane. They've branded my soul forever. But they both wrestled with really tough stuff. All the times he'd violated his own conscience, and he didn't understand that his profession, his job had enslaved him all those years. And Jane, the ideas that she had about God and things, and they both did battle with those things. And I'm telling you, the echoes of their story will ripple through time. They're the prime example of what I've said for 40 years, the enduring voices of a generation speak to the triumph of the human spirit. And if ever we needed amazing stories like this, it's now. Every single patient and every single client I have the privilege of serving, and some in very unique ways, share in everything that's become R.E.S.T.
Yeah.
It's hard not to mention them all the time because I think about them every day.
Yeah.
And as you know, with Jane, there's just a hole in my heart.
Oh, yeah.
I've watched that video we put together of her probably
over 100 times.
100 times.
Yeah.
And I might add, after we finished it, I just needed to be alone for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
It took me 3 days to recover from that.
Yeah.
So it's okay to hurt and to miss people and to celebrate the legacy of hope and freedom they leave us with.
Agreed. And I know that in the near future we're going to be talking about grief and mourning, and that's going to be an upcoming episode soon. But something that has struck me recently, and just in thinking about this and with Jane and everything, and of course my uncle passing away, things like that, I think that we mourn not because that person is gone, but because now we have to remember them for longer than we've known them.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's just the hole in my heart, knowing we had these dreams of everything we were going to do and the healing we were going to bring to people through her music and through R.E.S.T. and all of this. And, Mitchell's amazing, and we're going to do great things with them. But the reality is, when people are gone, as with Jeff and even Laura, they're in Montana. I don't see them that often, of course, but I think we want to hang on to so many things in time.
Yeah.
But it's like life is like riding a rapid.
Yeah.
It feels like sometimes anyway. And there's no holding on to anything very long. And my heart just isn't ready to let go yet. So it's hard.
We celebrate in the fact that every single client, at least that I've talked to, that's come to these doors, whether they've stepped out of time at this point or not, they've all said that they have experienced that relational, emotional, spiritual healing. Whether it transmits to physical or not, they have been able to experience freedom. And both Jeff and Jane had admitted that as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Virginia. All right, everyone. So, of course, this weekend we have our Day of Rest live. That's going to be at the Villa. Of course, it's a little bit too late now to secure those tickets, but we do now have an on-demand Day of Rest on the website. It is the foundation of this pilgrimage through rest. So if you have been listening to the podcast, you actually can use a coupon for that event. Just type in podcast in the coupon slot and you'll get a little bit of a discount as a thank you for listening to us, and hopefully to also, inspire you to continue through this journey. And also we have talked about this video that we have up online about Jane and the story I'll tell and rest. If you'd like to look that up, go ahead and just type in Virginia Dixon Nightbird and go ahead and leave a comment so that we know that you went ahead and watched it. We would love to hear from you. For updates about Rest and this podcast, please visit our Instagram or Facebook, The Place of Rest. If you'd like more information about Virginia or to support and join the cause of Rest, please go to virginiadixon.com/collaborate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to Rest with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.